From Carry the Load, these are lessons from the front. Stories of service and sacrifice from our military, veterans, first responders, and their families.
Thanks for tuning in to Lessons from the Front. I am Todd Boating, and today I'm joined by former Navy football standout Jeremy McGown. Easily the most intense yet respectful rivalry in all of sports, Jeremy and I talked about the pageantry and competitive nature of the upcoming Army-Navy football game and what it was like to play in it. He was also very quick to point out that his class at the Naval Academy was the first class to never lose to Army or Air Force. Other than that one bragging point, you'll hear very quickly that Jeremy is a forward-thinking man who comes from very grounded roots. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share for the benefit of others. Now here's my conversation with Jeremy McGown. If you are trying to describe to someone who is completely ignorant of the game of American football, what they're going to experience sitting in the stands watching a game between Army, Navy, what is that? How do you describe that?
I'm probably a really interesting person to ask that question. I've only been back to one game since I played in it. And even then, I think I was at the tailgater too long, so I didn't get the full experience, right? And so...
But you were on the field for 4 of these games.
I was, which is why maybe I have a unique point of view with that question because, right, I mean, to a certain degree, when you are playing in the game, which I appreciate now, you don't see a lot of the stuff. I didn't see the awesome flyover, the SEALs jumping out of planes and landing at midfield and the march on of the entire brigade and just we were in the locker room during all those moments and the flyovers and so there are two different perspectives. So the locker room perspective obviously was incredible, but I would say having lived enough life now, it's such an incredible game and opportunity. If to go like that has to be a huge check in the block if you have a list of things to do. To go to that game, the fans are incredible. You walking through the tailgaters and whatnot, you probably don't even realize it. You're passing, really high-ranking politicians and service people and leaders of Fortune 100 companies and whatnot, right? Just geared up, getting ready to go in, and you're going in to go watch two brothers duke it out, and you don't want to beat anybody more than you want to beat your brother. But then there's just this special feeling about it that it's just different than, and it's no offense to like an Ohio State, Michigan, or Texas A&M back in the day, or whatever that rivalry is. It's really, really different. And
how is the pageantry, the competition in that game different than what you've heard anyone else describe?
Maybe I'll describe it like this. If you think about, a lot college football is incredibly popular here. College over pro, there's just this level of, it's almost like a little more pureness, right? Now, obviously, we've entered unique times, but kids weren't getting paid, and it was just
traditionally it's a more pure game.
It was a little more love of the game, right? Yes. And what I would say about Army Navy is, it's another layer of that purity, right? Where for the most part, the kids aren't focused on going to the NFL or anything like that. And everything really is centered around, all of our weights say beat Army on them, right? I mean,
is in the locker room?
Yes.
All the weights say
exactly. And I would imagine Army has something very similar on the other side, right? when you are a plebe at the Naval Academy, every time you turn a corner, it's beat Army, sir or ma'am. It is so ingrained in everything you do all year. The week leading up to Army Navy is hard to explain what the campus turns into, right? I mean, they're just pranks everywhere. It's unbelievable. And the uniqueness of it being this genuine love after the game, right? There's zero, I can't wait to get those guys next year, right? I mean, it really is this, we're about to go, especially for the seniors, we're about to go fight together.
So you started off as a wide receiver your freshman year, right?
I was recruited as a option quarterback, as probably many people were to the academy, and inevitably, yes, I played wide receiver and return kicks in order to kind of get on varsity my first year. The defensive coordinator was always sort of after me to go over there. I wasn't really sure that I could do that was me, and inevitably, when Coach Johnson first asked me, he said, hey, we have a bunch of quarterbacks now, but we think that you can really help us out. And he kind of gave me a list of things that I could do. And one of them was go to defense. But I wanted to go back to quarterback inevitably at the time. And so I said, no, I'd rather stay on offense. I think I've got a real shot to get some playing time sooner rather than later at receiver. Like, put me at receiver. It's kind of receiver or running back, right? And so I was like, put me at receiver. And so that's as simple as that was. And
that's interesting, though. You're the defensive coordinator is recruiting you to go from the offense to the defense against his own coordinator.
He was. From time to time.
Was it like a jestful thing, or was he like, hey, don't tell anybody, but I want you to come over here? I mean, that's interesting.
He would always be in my ear about it, and I don't know how. It's funny because I've been in the same room with sort of the coordinators again, and they kind of talk about it like, oh, you stole one of our potential future quarterbacks, right? Like, that's but at the time I wasn't thinking about it like that, because I probably was not going to be the starting quarterback my sophomore year, and inevitably I was the starting safety my sophomore year, which was unexpected until basically the first game. And then I just caught so much momentum on that side of the ball. I really started to fall in love with it and kind of became a leader on the defense. And so when it came time to sort of make that decision, was I going to go back? I don't know. I didn't want to. And yeah.
How is leadership on the defense, or leadership in football? How's leadership in football different from leadership in corporate America, different from leadership in your time in uniform on the DDG 99?
Oh, man. I would say it's more similar than people tend to give it credit for.
So leadership is leadership?
In some ways, yes. Leadership is leadership. Now, part of leadership is reading the room and reading the audience and understanding who your people are and whatnot. And so, there are so many similarities. One of the reasons we pay such close attention to it in the military is because the stakes are so high. And so you're really in tune with the dynamics of, when I do this, it motivates this person this way, or when I do this, like, you're just so in tune with leadership as a language and as a thought process and what that means, especially coming out of a service academy and then rolling into the military.
I want you to imagine yourself going back to the Naval Academy and you're teaching. You're standing up in front of a group of midshipmen. What is the one thing that you are going to impart on them that is more important when it comes to leadership than anything else?
Great question, especially at an institution like that where they're just inundated with leadership philosophies and theories and scenarios. To me, when I look back at it all, if I had to narrow it down to one concept, one word, which is not easy to do, I think I would have to stick with accountability.
Okay.
I just think that at the end of the day, that's a word that many people know the definition of, but they don't truly understand what that means, right?
Right.
So uh, that means whatever happens, that's on you. You have to get everyone ready. I think about like a ship goes aground in the Navy, and in no time there's like a helicopter coming out, landing. The captain of that ship gets in that helicopter, and you never see him or her again, right? Like it is, because it doesn't matter that it was 2 a.m. and your seaman was on watch and fell asleep, and that navigator maybe made a wrong turn or whatever. At the end of the day, you were accountable. Did you train them properly? Did you, just all those different layers? And that's why you have that responsibility, right? If one of your troops passes away, you make that call and you hold yourself accountable. You're not pointing fingers, you're not whatever. So you're just, I don't know, being resolute and tough enough and resilient enough to take on that responsibility.
I mean, is there a specific instance or story that caused you to put accountability at the forefront of your teachings?
So on my second ship, DDG 99, the Farragut, Commander Daly was our commanding officer. And when he came on
Okay, hold on.
board,
DDG 99.
yes, the
The
USS Farragut, yes.
Okay, so explain to people, though, before we get back to your commanding officer, what is a DDG?
It's a guided destroyer, so it's a relatively offensive ship.
So does each of the letters stand for something specific?
Yes.
I'm really getting you. I can tell I'm really tapping into your memory bank, though.
You are. Look, yeah. Don't test me too hard. It's a guided missile destroyer, right? It's a newer version than the old DDs, right? And so at the end of the day, it's a destroyer.
And the Farragut's a nod to Admiral Farragut from the Civil War. Got it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So anyway, you're commanding officer.
Yes, commanding officer, Commander Daly. I remember, there was just something different about this guy. He was not, no one would describe him as my nicest commanding officer. He was just all about this. And I remember him coming in one day after we had not done so well on an inspection pretty early on, after he had come on board, and him sitting us around the table and asking that question in the wardroom, saying, what's the most important word to any officer? And people had all sorts of guesses, but inevitably to him, it was accountability. And the reason that stuck with me is because he took that to heart. So for the rest of his command, he really honed in on that. He would know that someone messed up, maybe an enlisted person or whatever, but he was coming directly to you, right? And he was going to get on you in a way as though you did that and you messed up, right? But people got on board really, really quickly. And he held everyone accountable to a point where I got to see it manifest itself. Inevitably, we had, what we call an in-serve inspection, which happens once every 5 years and is like mandated by Congress. And it's this huge deal. And we essentially broke almost like every record there was on that thing. And it was all about him teaching us how to hold others accountable. But I saw the power of that. I saw it change an entire culture in less than 12 months, right? And a ship operating as an average naval warship, which, by the way, is saying something, because that is still at a high level, to being just absolutely elite, just absolutely amazing in every way. And so that translated into our deployment, right? It was like, man, we're operating at a different level, right? These watches are different. These missions we're going on are different. We are really, really good. And it all went back to these, and maybe that's what it was. Holding, like, if you're going to hold someone accountable, it's with everything, all the way down to this inspection that seems like, so
it's not picking and choosing is what you're saying. It's
correct.
Hey, this is the expectation, not just for an inspection, but making sure that you're on time for a meeting, making sure that that the proper communications in the turnover of watchmen is occurring. Okay.
Correct. Then I layered that, then you go back historically and I would layer that on to, man, why was that football coach so amazing? Whatnot. It's like, man, I think about it, if I really narrow it down, that was accountability, right? Or why did I do well at that one thing back then? It's like, man, I didn't even really know what it was at the time, but in that moment, I was doing it right. I was holding others accountable. And so as I look back, it's been a pretty major theme, but that was the moment that made me put a word to a common theme amongst the many great leaders who have been
awesome.
in my life.
So you leave the academy right as things are really, 2005 is when you left, or 2006?
2006 would have been my last football season, but 2007 I graduated.
Okay. Right when things are really getting heated over in the sandbox, specifically in Iraq, you end up on a guided missile destroyer, the Farragut. And where were you guys deployed?
My first ship was actually the Gonzales, the DDG-66 Gonzales, but so I did a couple of deployments. Mostly we'd be in the Gulf supporting Iraq, Afghanistan, but I was also, during that time, the special forces, mostly the SEALs, got really busy, obviously, with Iraq, Afghanistan things. And so one of the missions that they couldn't do as much of was what we call VBSS, which is Visit, Board, Search, and Seizure.
Okay.
And that's where you get a lot of the counter-piracy and those sorts of things, like off the coast of Somalia and whatnot.
So like think in terms of, was it Captain Phillips? Was that the movie?
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So during those times was exactly when I was in and over in that area. And so inevitably I raised my hand. That sounded really fun, right? And I raised my hand, got trained up at Blackwater by a bunch of
fun or exciting?
Exciting. Exciting, right? I mean, as someone who probably wanted to be special forces, kind of got talked out of trying to go that route, and it was just, I was still really close. I still wanted that level of intensity, and so went and got trained up at Blackwater, and so did a lot of that.
Okay.
As well during those times. So
I wasn't aware of that.
Over there, yeah, a lot of coast of Somalia type stuff and whatnot, but it was fun. So we basically just, take the small boat off the ship and take it over, and so a lot of counter piracy stuff, but also boarding cargo ships and things like that where they thought they had intel and searching those as well.
So what is the goal when you step off of your ship at that point? And you're going to a ship that y'all have come across, probably found on radar through some kind of surveillance out beyond. Y'all get to that point where this other ship is. What is the goal or the mission coming off of your ship to theirs?
Again, there are different missions. So like a cargo vessel with possible, weapons of mass destruction pieces or like whatever, versus maybe a stowaway versus a mayday call because a ship is under attack by pirates, right? Like the mission kind of changed depending on what that scenario was. So probably, the most famous of the missions at that time would have been the piracy, which I'd say the biggest surprise to me was that it was such a constant thing. Like, I don't know that it wasn't really hitting our news cycle like that here, and I don't know that we were really briefed in that way, but the piracy at that time, it was just going on constantly. If they got on a U.S. ship, cargo vessel, it was an accident usually. They didn't mean to do that, and so that wasn't happening a lot. That was the only time it probably hit our news cycle, but it was just...
you don't even hear about it much anymore, but it's got to be going on.
I know. And so I do think more... At the time, cargo vessels still were not wanting to invest in the security and things that maybe they do now, the private security and things of that sort. But I'm quite certain, just like then. I mean, it was going on. I mean, it was all day, every day.
Really?
Oh yeah, and that's you learn a lot about that reading books and going to the Naval Academy, obviously. but you really get to see firsthand out there on a deployment how important it is to control the seas and control those passageways. It's just incredibly critical, and there are other countries out there trying to do it, and there are other countries out there that need to do it but don't have the capacity to do it, that we have to help sometimes. And there are all these little games going on. You're on edge, and by the way, some submarines are under there doing some things too, and you're just, there's so much going on in what looks like a peaceful, not too much going on sort of scenario. But there's at any given moment, to your point, I mean, that's we've got a lot of men and women out there doing some pretty critical work.
Did you guys ever have to deploy the big guns in support of the operations? Because I mean, I don't even know how far those weapons will shoot.
I know. I guess there's a classified and unclassified answer there, but that's So we so more there was missiles than the guns.
I see. And
just because of just what was going on at the time, Iraq, Afghanistan. So our guys were really highly trained on, especially supporting Marines with the big guns whenever it made sense. But that it just wasn't as applicable during that particular war, during those moments. It was more protecting the carrier to get the planes off or launching missiles from the missile deck.
How far away from the carrier were you?
Oh, it just depends on what kind of operations you're doing and what.
Typically, though, you couldn't see them, right? You were far enough away, but you couldn't see them. Is that right?
I wouldn't say that. So it's you're in a battle group normally when you deploy,
right,
if you're going to deploy with the carrier. So depending on, like, each ship sort of has a duty, and depending on your duty, it may be your job to stay really close to that carrier during flight ops or whatnot, or it may be your job to kind of be really far out and not be seen, but adding an additional perimeter. And so there's a lot of different jobs. So sometimes you're very, very close, and sometimes you're refueling from the carrier. Like there's a lot going on in a given, depending on what's happening in that battle group in that day.
Do you miss the Navy?
I miss aspects of the Navy for sure. I miss a lot of it. But I don't regret getting out one bit. But like, it's just like football. I mean, there's just certain things that will never be appropriate, or like there are just certain dynamics that'll never come up that you give up. And there's a certain level of closeness that you get with your brothers and sisters and your people that it's on, like, you almost don't even have time. It's not possible to do it, right? I mean, I'm not going to go deploy with someone for 8 months or whatever, and
That's true. Nowadays, we're lucky to have an employee for 8 months, it seems like. But so what, like, there's certainly nothing that got your heart pumping the way that, when that game started in running out onto the field, when you board that ship, there's nothing that gets your heart pumping like those moments.
Right.
Is there one, when you were out at sea, is there one moment like that comes to mind?
I think, just generally speaking, whenever you get the call and you hear, on the radio, and I remember being officer of the deck a couple of times, and you hear either the Mayday call or whatever, and maybe we get the actual pirates on, and we're having communications with them, and we're giving the appropriate verbal warnings or whatever, and then they just start to talk a sort of way of like, we understand you're a U.S. ship and we don't really care, sort of thing, right? And so then you're just like, you're down there and you're gearing up, you're in the armory, right? I just think, just that adrenaline goes up to that next level, that whatever, you're getting on the small boat, you're going down, you're lowering into the water. It's like, all right, like, your weapons are a little more on the ready than when you're kind of approaching a vessel that you might board because you don't know what's going on, but just like you're hyped up and you're, and you're headed that way, and people start pointing weapons at you and like, it's just a very, you can't replicate that. Like that's just
Well, tell me
that's
a little bit
level
more
of-
about that then. So you get a Mayday call, you get the pirates on the line. Hey, I hope you guys understand what you're doing here. Oh yeah, we understand what we're doing, and we don't care that you're a U.S. ship. We have our own agenda. So you lower your small boat in the water and you start heading that way.
right. Yeah, and so
What happened?
inevitably, I just don't know what all I'm supposed to say and what I'm not supposed to say at this point. But
you say what you're talking about from a security standpoint.
yeah.
Well, okay, tell me a story that you heard. How about that?
Yeah, okay, sure. Inevitably, right? Like, you might be going over and all of a sudden you're getting weapons firing at you and someone's got an RPG pointing at this little small inflatable boat that you're in, right? And so it's just those moments of like, okay, like, can you stay calm? Can you keep your heart rate where
Keep
it's
your
supposed
poise,
to be?
yeah.
Can you keep your poise? Like, you're the officer on this thing, right? If you're freaking out, everyone's gonna freak out. Like, are you
And how many men do you have with you if you were to do something like this?
So you probably have 2 rigid hull inflatable boats, with 7 or 8 people on each.
Okay.
And then, so the big thing is though, what's crazy, why you think you're always going to be okay is that you have this giant warship behind you, and I've got all the weapons manned, right? And
they can see that.
and they
The
can
bad
see
guys
that.
can see
They
that
see
you're
that.
trained on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that moment, did you have to deploy your weapons, or were they smart enough to say, you know what, we're not going to get out of this thing unscathed, so we should probably tuck tail and run?
Inevitably, my boat would not have to employ. We got out of the way because they did start shooting and let the ship do its thing, right? And that's probably the toughest part that we generally, it's not said that you don't want to shoot first, but generally speaking, I mean, you're trying to read those threats as an officer, but there are all these ramifications to being wrong as far as if if
Talking like rules of engagement.
exactly.
Yeah. And so I know anybody hearing this would want to ask the same question that I'm going to ask. How did it finish?
Lots of smoke and fire on their end of the small vessel that they were on, and lots of people in the water, and took captive who we needed to take captive, and that's probably the best summary I could give without saying too much.
So now I'm going to take you all the way back to you're standing in front of a class of midshipmen. Based on that story, what is the lesson you want them to learn from what happened in your experience?
There's a good chance that someday either something really, really intense will be happening, or people will be feeling like the world is crumbling, or people will be panicking, and there's going to be a good amount of people, or at the very least a few, who are looking at you and watching you and waiting to see how you respond and react, or what direction you give them. So make sure you're ready for that moment. Make sure you're preparing yourself for that moment. You never know when it's going to come, and you never truly know how you're going to respond until it happens. So do what you have to do, right? Read the books, go the extra mile, gain an understanding, keep yourself mentally and physically prepared, talk to people who have been through it before, just absorb as much as you can and in as many ways as you can, because you have to operate as though that moment's coming, and once it does, it's too late to go learn. You're just going to react at that point.
So getting back to football, what is the one memory that sticks with you from the Army Navy? From your 4 years, undefeated, Army-Navy football game?
Good question. I I think for me, and I guess this is a little bit of a cop out, but it's true. I just remember just having my arms around two of my brothers who were also my roommates at the academy, who were also great football players in that like last game after we had won, right? And um, just knowing that football was coming to an end, I just think about I think about that moment and, you know, never being able to recapture that moment, but just being like, this is what it's all about. And again, I'm actually really, really good friends with a couple of those Army guys that were on those other teams, right? And so we're really good friends now. And just thinking about that moment, which is really where you started off with the Army Navy question, is just something special about that game. It really is, and so many of those people who were in that group went off to do incredible things that for this country that most people will never know about, right?
Right.
Like they didn't go to the NFL, but they went off and did, I went to school with a bunch of Clint Bruces, right? Like this. And so it's just that moment, you just can't replace it. You can't go get that moment anywhere else.
Do you ever pinch yourself and go, man, here I am from a lineage of country folks by way of Houston. I'm at the Naval Academy. I played football on a stage that very few people. And then I get to go serve my country. You ever just kind of pinch yourself and go, man, am I fortunate?
It would be ridiculous for me to, like, one, we just don't have enough time for me to walk you through all the people and circumstances that put me in this seat, right? Got me to this day, got me to accomplish all those things. It's just, the list is just, it's too long with too many people who have impacted me in that way. So,
and probably some of them you don't even know.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so along those lines. Does the name Calvin Huey ring a bell?
I'm not sure.
So this is an interesting fact that I came across. Calvin Huey was the first man of color to play in the Army-Navy football game, and he played with Roger Staubach, whom you've worked with before in the past.
I did know that. Yes. And one of my favorite humans in the world.
Absolutely. And I just, hearing what you said kind of, triggered that thought, because I think people have tried to get this point across in the past. We are a product of all of the sacrifices that have gone before us.
Exactly.
Yes, we may have done the work, but somebody else put that brick in the road that helped us get to where we are.
Oh.
And so that's what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely. That's in any realm that I step into. If you go down the African American trail, obviously there's no realm that I don't step into today that someone took a big risk and made a bold move before I got there.
Sure.
To make it not so ridiculous for me to sit in a boardroom or be an officer or play in an Army-Navy game or attend the Naval Academy or be the quarterback of a 5A football team in Texas, right? That's a great point, right? There are just countless people, right?
Yes.
I was fortunate enough to grow up in a house with an incredible leader, not to derail us too much, but my mother was an incredible leader. She was in the educational system, inevitably became a principal, a very well-known principal down in the Houston area, and she just got a school named after her.
Really?
And so
how cool.
It was very cool.
That's an honor.
That's a great honor, right? It's something I wasn't even thinking about. I grew up around that greatness, and I very much so was aware of it. She was a big reason that I always wanted to be a great leader, and just getting to go down there, it was a great moment to be able to pause, look back at my earlier childhood and life and that incredible leadership that I got to witness, which was a huge advantage later going into the academy, even being a quarterback in Little League and things like that. All those things were advantages that I had because of the inspiration that I took from her. So that was so again, another great moment to look back and reflect and pull all these different nuggets from that moment and re-understand them and whatnot. And again, inevitably, outside of those moments, I just don't do it that often. I should probably do it more often. I don't do it that often, and I don't consider that an advantage. It's maybe even a bit of a flaw sometimes. I have to be careful about that.
So what was your favorite tradition at the academy, football or not?
One of the cool things to look at is if you go back and visit now, you can go see noon formation, right? Noon meal formation. So you go and you see everyone coming to the yard. I remember I got to be a battalion commander my senior year. And so just, I'm out here with a sword and getting everybody in formation and 4th Battalion, attend, huh. Right? You just have this whole big thing and people are marching in. At the end of the day, when you're there, it's just like, I'm just going to lunch, Like, it wasn't even a big deal. But you see people are there to see it now. And so it is cool for my kids to be able to see putting that level of discipline and tradition into something which at the time was as basic for us as just going to go eat a meal, right?
Right.
And so
you were excited because that was that was the bridge to get to go eat.
Exactly.
As you're aware, Carry the Load is about making sure that we honor those who never got to take off the uniform. The time you served and the folks that you served with or went to school with, inevitably some of those people probably never got to come home. Is there anybody in particular who you're carrying with you to this day that you want to make sure we're remembering to honor?
I don't want to get too emotional about that. That's a tough question always. I've had several Navy football teammates pass away, and I think that Keenan Little, who was a good friend of mine, that's the toughest. I carry him a lot. It's hard to talk about, but I carry him a lot. In a way, I feel like I could have been there for him because we were such good friends, and I'll carry that one for a long time.
What do you want people to know about Keenan?
It was just a great, beautiful person in ways it's hard to describe. He was just 100% about others, despite being incredibly personally talented and whatnot. And yeah, he was just always there for others. And I don't know that others were there for him when he maybe needed it the most.
You guys played football together?
We did.
I want to press you a little bit. Tell me about Keenan.
Everyone loved Keenan. Like, everyone loved Keenan. He was just the most joyful person. He just wanted to get to know everybody and love everybody. And he wanted to be a pilot. And he just studied his tail off to be in incredibly tough engineering classes and do his best to make great grades, and was the guy on the team that, I was talking about the motivational stuff. He was the guy that if it was 10 degrees outside, he was going to come out, no sleeves, just jersey tucked up, some of his stomach's exposed and whatnot, and he was going to make fun of everybody who wasn't basically dressed exactly like that, right? And just get everybody going. And so
did he become a pilot?
Inevitably, no, he did not. He went to pilot school, and it's kind of a long story after that. But he ended up struggling with some demons, and yeah, we lost him a couple years ago.
It's it's unbelievable that someone can be as accomplished and as good of a person as that, and that they can't see the wonderful nature that they bring to the table, and that they would struggle as much. But it's real. I know it's real, and I appreciate you sharing that about Keenan with us. So Keenan Little is the one we're going to keep in our thoughts.
I appreciate that.
So I appreciate you being here.
Thank you again.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lessons from the Front. If this resonated with you in the least, please subscribe. And please, please, please share it with at least one person. These are the stories that make us uniquely American. These are the stories that preserve the integrity of our nation.